Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon your time zone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm. I happen to be in the Atlanta area. Today, compliments of RenWeb, we're talking about when your first school crisis is your crisis manager's first crisis. This is part of the Crisis Coach webinar series that RenWeb has been providing to its members and associates, and we're pleased to have you with us today. We invite you to become our friend at Facebook, Firestorm Solutions. Twitter, you can follow us at Firestorm Soul. The hashtag today is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Please keep in mind the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and the work product should be reviewed in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. This information should not be interpreted or considered legal advice or legal opinion. Firestorm is pleased to have a long relationship with our good friends at RenWeb. If you wish to watch past webinars in this series, please go to Firestorm, and you can watch previous webinars that have been recorded, or you can register for future webinars. Our presenter today is going to be Jim Satterfield. He's the president of Firestorm. And in the absence of the people from RenWeb, Jim, could you say some nice things about our co-host and sponsor?
Well, it's always easy to talk about RenWeb, and I'm sure that they're on the phone helping folks today with their systems in operation. By the way, the RenWeb software does provide you several emergency features that will be useful in a disaster or crisis, and would encourage you to look at those. If you've got questions about that, Firestorm would be glad to assist you in leveraging how that system can be utilized and getting the message out, maintaining your document controls, etc. My name is Jim Satterfield. I am the president of Firestorm and one of the founders, and we're excited about doing this webinar series with you, sharing some of the insights and issues that we've been talking about. Today, we're going to focus on, is this your crisis manager's first crisis? What do you need to do to help them? How can you better support that answer? We'll talk about things that you need to be putting in place. We'll talk about strategies, questions that you need to identify, specific actions, and communications. Of all the webinars that we do, this will probably be one of the ones that will have great applications. I think we've all had this aspect of a crisis management issue brought back to our minds with the shootings that occurred in Oregon, and to respond about what that would be like if it occurred at your school, on your campus. So as we think about that, that's the environment we find ourselves in today, whether it's the armed intruder or active shooter or natural disasters or even a cyber breach, and all of those exposures that we see within our schools today. So the K through 12 school market is certainly faced with unique challenges. When we think about disasters or crisis, we're focused on, is this a danger or an opportunity? JFK in his book used the Chinese symbols for a crisis, the combining of danger and opportunity. And if you focus only on half of that, you're going to miss where you need to be and what the impacts would be associated with it. And our goal here is always to try to transform this crisis into value for your organization, for your students, for your families, for your teachers. And it's a turning point whenever we think about a crisis. The future events, the brand and reputation of your school will certainly be a key element to be seen. But we want to focus today specifically on that new crisis manager, the person that you have within your organization that's been tasked with managing this crisis and watching it escalate and helping to de-escalate it and to protect everyone. And what we'll try to do first is to describe a little bit of what it's like in that area and what you need to be concerned about specifically, and then we'll give you the steps that you need to take. It's important to always remember that most everything you learn initially in a crisis is wrong. You're going to be forced to make decisions based upon wrong or incomplete information. And when we think about our new crisis manager here that's been placed into this role, they're going to have some difficulty if they've not ever experienced this type of an environment before. By the way, it's easy if you have, here's a good choice and here's a bad choice, to say, gee, Jim, I think I'll take the good choice and not the bad one. But in a crisis, it's going to be, here's a bad choice, which one are you going to do? And unfortunately, you're going to have to make that decision based upon incomplete or wrong information. That is a major stress point in any school and in any organization in crisis. At the same time, where we have all of these parameters initially, we've got to remember that what's going to happen and the decisions that we make will have consequences that will last for years to come. In many cases, you'll be defined by the nature of that crisis or disaster that struck, and you'll immediately be the first thing that comes to your mind. If we say the name Columbine, you don't think about the flower for the state of Colorado, you think about the shootings that occurred there. So it's important to know that this is the environment in which we find ourselves. Now, the attributes of a disaster or crisis are listed here, and you'll see the escalating events, the loss of command and control, how you respond could easily create that second crisis. But the third bullet up from the bottom is one I want you to spend a second on. Every crisis is a human crisis. That's an important aspect for you to keep in mind. Everyone that's involved here is someone's son or daughter, a family member, and they're going to be concerned about that and respond appropriately. Now, a crisis is always by nature a surprise, and you've heard me share in our webinar series that the last time a surprise was good, I was 5, and it was my birthday. Now, imagine your new crisis manager in a situation where we've had this event occur, and they're going to have to lead that response and direct the actions and deal with it, and it's coming to them as an absolute surprise. In your office today, if somebody were to run in and say, oh, we've got this going on, that's probably not good news. It's probably bad news with this type of an event. That's why structuring all of these responses in advance makes such a big strategic difference. So I want to introduce another concept to you today in light of being in a crisis and show you a little bit of why it's put such a strain on this new crisis manager. And that's the concept of visibility vulnerability. So as you're working on your vulnerability threat assessment or your hazard impact matrix and you're listing the types of exposures and things to be concerned about, here's something else. And it's the visibility vulnerability. If you find yourself in a crisis, you're suddenly going to be significantly more visible in the media, to your students, to your parents, to your teachers, and the attention will certainly be drawn there. If we look at the political campaigns that are going on now, you see that as someone moves to the front of the pack to become a leader in the polls or in the second or third position, their comments get further scrutiny that wouldn't apply to candidates who don't have that visibility. So if you find yourself in a crisis, you will have a specific vulnerability because of the high level of visibility that you're going to have. And that's what this first write-up is talking about on the page in front of you. It explains then that because you're in this position, your visibility is a significant one for you to address. Now, the second type of visibility vulnerability is the lack of being able to tell what's going to happen next. Failure to monitor for the threats and risk are one of the 5 common failures in a disaster. So you need to be able to understand what's going on out there and have your own intelligence network. If you do not have an intelligence network, you're going to find out that you're going to be continually surprised, and you will also find out that you will not be able to know if your message is getting through. Are people understanding what you're asking them to do? Are they clear in support of the types of issues and problems that you've had? Now, we've done some webinars this summer around this idea of an intelligence network, and we'll talk about it a couple of times more in today's webinar, but it's based upon the concept that when people know something, they talk, And where they talk today is on social media. If someone has ill intent, 80% of the time a second person knows. And 67% of the time, 2 or more people know. And so that information is out there to be understood. Similarly, you want to know how your people are reacting to the disaster and crisis. And having that intelligence, being able to monitor their comments, will provide your crisis manager with a great insight. So we'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. So the crisis environment that we've been trying to describe is typical of what you're seeing on the screen. There's a disaster that's occurred. Senior management has this limited and wrong information. There's confusion on what's really going on and what's happening. What do you do now? What are you going to monitor? What are you going to say? And you're under pressure. And there is certainly a brand and reputation impact on your school and potentially a growing liability position. So that's the environment that we have to find ourselves in to respond. Now, years ago, we used to have a thing called the golden hour. There was a disaster or crisis, you had an hour to talk to your PR firm, to meet with your attorney, to get the senior management team together and say, what are we going to do? It then went to the golden minutes, and now we're into the golden seconds. Because in today's world, whatever's going on within your school is now going to be out on social media. People are going to be talking about it, making comments, sharing information. Students will be posting pictures and making comments about, hey, they didn't tell us what's going on. We don't know what to do. These terrible things are starting to happen. And so as those comments come out, that information can well create a second crisis. So we need to understand what's occurring and what's being said. And you need to understand that before now. People want to know what's going on at every step along the way and expect you, and particularly this new crisis manager that we've been talking about, to be in a position to respond and manage those events. And so that's the environment that we find ourselves in today. The instant crisis, the instant response, the instant messages going out. And we're going to talk also about some tools that will help you through that process. So as we think about it, this new crisis manager that you've just appointed has assumed that role. Now, like most people, they know what they know, and they know some of what they don't know. But in that category of what you don't know is that larger circle here, the orange or the red that you see on the screen. So having the intelligence network, having a plan that tells you what you're to do and what you're to say at every step along the way, having gone through a test exercise will help your crisis manager to reduce that big portion out there that they don't even know what it is that they don't know. And that's the fear going into managing this crisis, that they need to get that under control and to have a better understanding. Now, you're going to test your crisis management plan at your school. Now, are you going to test your crisis management plan now in advance of a disaster or crisis, or are you going to wait for that test to be the actual crisis that comes in that causes a disruption within your school? So we've got to plan in advance. We need to make sure that everyone is aware and ready to support the decisions that must be made at each one of these key points as we go through. So that brings us to, where do we start? I understand it's complex. I understand we can move in a bunch of different directions, but if this is our new crisis manager standing there, what are you going to do? Look at the two comments that are on the screen. A crisis is not business as usual. A crisis is business as unusual. And so we're not, again, dealing in this environment where it's clear-cut. Here's a good decision. Here's a bad decision. Which one do you want? Those types of decisions are easy. In a crisis, it's going to be much more difficult. We have the incomplete, wrong information. We've got 2 choices or 3 choices, and all of which are bad. Now you have to pick one and do. That's the environment that this crisis manager is going to find themselves. So let's stop and talk about that crisis manager. Do we have the right person? How do we know if we have this right person? First of all, the person must be decisive. If you're dealing with an individual that can't make a decision, someone that ponders information or just continues to wait until more information comes in a crisis, it's an environment that you must be able to make those decisions now, not later. They've got to be a good communicator, because We can't have any confusion or misinterpretation of what we needed, and so communication skills will become significant. Look at the third bullet. Must have sufficient authority or expertise to be accepted. If you appoint someone in your school as the crisis manager and they don't have that background, they're going to be undermined from the very beginning, and the crisis response will not be effective and not carry forward. And they've got to have the ability to build a team, to maintain professional relationships around everyone in the organization. If you're looking for some key words to think about the characteristics of this, person is there a leader. And we always state that every crisis needs a general, someone to come in, someone that's authoritative, that can be viewed as credible by everyone involved, but is easy with making those decisions. That's the environment that we find ourselves in a crisis, and why it's so very, very critical. Knowledgeable, subject matter expertise, and the last one, resourceful, because it's a dynamic situation and things are changing, you need someone that can suddenly bring the right skills to the table to make a difference. Now, if we're thinking about it, there are roles and responsibilities, and if I wanted to summarize it in 2 words, it's makes decisions. This new crisis manager is going to have to do all the actions that you see here: manage the recovery area, ensure a smooth integration of all the tasks, coordinate communications, provide oversight, provide guidance back on the issues that were occurring here, report back to the head of school or the CEO or the board associated with your school. Those are all skills that are going to be needed and to be placed in that type of an environment. And remember, we're operating in an environment with limited information and even wrong information. So all of this type of background will be leveraged across the 5 stages of escalation in a crisis. You've heard us talk about these in previous webinars. Pre-action is all the stuff that you're doing now, the sitting in a training program, getting your plan in place, developing your crisis communications plan and message maps, or your other steps that you must in fact have in place. The event occurs. The focus then shifts into life and safety types of decisions, the evacuate, the shelter in place, the lockdown, the lockout. And so in onset, that's where we are focused on our emergency plan. As soon as that is stabilized, then we're looking at an impact assessment, first at a high level and then in a more detailed level, so that you're able to figure out what are we going to be exposed to, what do we need to do, and the crisis manager starts to take the leadership role here and coordinate our response. Our response might be a reunification plan to get parents and students back together, or responding to a particular threat or an issue. And then in the post-recovery area, leading into what we need to do here that are lessons learned, that we can do a better job next time as it comes together. Now I want to go under the covers a little bit more about this crisis event that we're talking about and talk about it in 2 dimensions. We're going to make it a 2-dimensional problem. First dimension that we're going to focus on is the complexity of it. And something that a new crisis manager may be able to be fairly effective on is the targeted crisis, something that's easily identifiable, and it only becomes complex if we do a poor job in managing it. And the mitigation is very straightforward as we work through that process. This could be a lightning strike or a tornado report or a hurricane, some type of an event coming in that we have some notice of, that we're able to respond to, and it's very targeted. Maybe there's a problem in the chemistry lab with something that has had a negative reaction, but it doesn't impact the entire school. It's limited into a particular component in an area. Something that's more complex, a complex crisis would have many attributes. Maybe there's a physical event and it's also tied together with a violence, or I listed here a data breach to give you something additional to think about in that element. To go through and say, these are the attributes that we must focus on. And it's going to take a much more sophisticated response, and therefore that crisis manager is going to need more of a support team in place to be able to handle it. Additionally, we want to think about the time to react. So we've got the complexity and we have the reaction time. If it's any crisis, we have to be reactive and urgent, but we're focused on the event. The whole organization here is not consumed. That, again, is going to be easier for that crisis manager to deal with than something that affects all of our business functions at our school. And those that do are going to be an extreme urgency. The whole organization is consumed by that event. I think that we could easily say that the community college in Oregon has been consumed by the event there that occurred. So this is the environment that we find it. Focusing on the complexity and the time to react, that crisis manager is now having to make decisions of what we're going to do and what we're going to communicate. So let's give them some help here. The first thing is that we've got to identify the why of the actions or the why of the communications. Why are we going to do these things, and why are we going to say those things? And we follow a predict, plan, perform methodology to help support those complex decisions and the urgency that's here. In the predict, you want to discuss what's going to happen next. You want to be able to say, okay, given this, then that's going to mean that. That starts to get us to focus us over onto the consequences of what's involved. But understanding that at every stage of the crisis, we continue to go back to this predict process, because that will drive our decisions and will help to mitigate the impacts. Planning then is what's our strategy, what's our plan, what's our process that we're going to put into place. The perform is identify specifically what we're going to do and what we're going to say, and then execute it. If you want to give this new crisis manager some support, have them focus on the questions that you see immediately below. This quick test: what is it that you know? Are you concerned? If so, about what? What's your strategy or your plan? What are you going to monitor? What are you going to communicate to whom, how, and why? And we'll talk more about communications in a few minutes, but we want to really try to continue to zero in on the actions that we need to take. And if we're going to do that, we need to break that into a couple of steps. The first would be, what are the questions? What are the strategy questions that come up to this new crisis management that they're going to be focused on? What's occurred? What's known? What will happen next? What are you concerned about? What's the plan? What are you going to monitor? We're going to talk about monitoring a couple of times on multiple slides today, because knowing where events are and where they're going and what's already occurred becomes absolutely critical. You can't imagine a general running a battle if he didn't have the ability to know where's the enemy, what's their size, their strength associated with it. And similarly, in a crisis, you need to be able to monitor where's the next threat coming from. Are the people understanding what we need them to do? How is this going forward within the organization? And then right behind it, what are the metrics? How are we going to know if we did a good job or not? What are our 3 key messages? Now, we can't, in a crisis, give out 100 messages at once. People aren't going to read a book. You have to be concise. And the most that we find in a crisis is you can direct people with 3 specific messages. And so that's a key breakthrough for you and your planning as you look at your crisis communications plan. And so for every vulnerability and threat that you've identified, what are your 3 key messages to each stakeholder group at each point in that crisis? Who's going to be the spokesperson? Have they had training? You can even do media training in the middle of a crisis. We prefer to see it done in advance, but clearly it can be done when it has to be in those environments. What are the threats, risks, and vulnerabilities? Who are the internal and external parties? We focus both looking internally and looking externally. Sometimes these individuals have agendas. Maybe this crisis they'll use to their advantage to raise an issue that they've been trying to get the school to focus on, or to cause disharmony in it. For those of you that have unionized teachers, maybe this is an issue triggered by the union or having an impact associated there. What's the agendas of all of the individuals that are involved? Now, engagement by counsel. If you bring in an outside crisis management firm, which we would recommend that having that additional set of eyes and ears will be a big help, you will want to have them engaged by your legal counsel, by your general counsel for the school or the outside law firms that you use, so that there's a potential attorney-client privilege. Quick plug for Firestorm: if you need a crisis manager, we're certainly glad to be there and help you. We begin work immediately virtually and move on site as you would need. but you want that crisis management firm to be engaged by counsel. You also want to be very cognizant of what is my records retention policy during and after the crisis. In many of these events, there will be litigation, and so you want to be prepared for that and thinking about that even while we're going through and having to make these decisions. So now we've talked about some strategy questions. What are the actions? Here are the actions that we need to take. This crisis manager is going to be overseeing and following up and monitoring them at every step along the way. Establish what happened. Identify the key information context. Who can tell me how badly the building was damaged or how many people were hurt or what else is going on? Identify the risk and vulnerabilities. Establish command and control. Now, if this is a physical event, a workplace violence event, a shooting at the school, a fire, then the police or the fire department are going to assume command and control of your school at that point in time. But how do you interface with them? What's the command structure? There's that monitoring and intelligence network coming up again, because you have to understand, is my message getting out? How is it being received? What are others saying about what we're doing? And the term of art here is the merged media. That social media and traditional media together are combined to use the term merged media. And it's easy to be able to see and do and understand if you use the right tools and have that established. We strongly recommend you do it in advance to establish a baseline so that this way in the crisis you can see where there's been an escalation and moving forward. There will be brand supporters and brand detractors. You want to identify those because the people that are supporting the school and the decisions, we want to reinforce those messages. We want to then be able to identify who the brand detractors are that are hurting us in our management of this crisis. You will need to conduct your own investigation. I understand the police or the fire or others will be doing that, but you need to come to your own conclusions about what occurred and what was known. That will become extremely important as we move into the later stages of the crisis. Identify all the stakeholders. This could be your parents, your students, your teachers. Maybe it's a regulator. Maybe it's the media. Who is pushing the issues at this point in time? You create your initial messages that you're going out with, and we'll talk specifically about those in a few minutes, but you want to not get in front of this, and you never want to say anything that you think is true. You want to make sure we only give true information at each step along the way. Again, we have to monitor, identify the spokesperson, do the training. And if it's a large event, if you've had a relocation, if you've had a loss of a building, if there's questions out there, you may find that a call center will be needed to field that, either within your school or externally. If you need assistance in designing that, we have some strategic partners who can stand up a call center in about 45 minutes in the wake of a disaster or a crisis. Establish how you're going to communicate. Your website will probably become overburdened. It certainly happened to the college in Oregon. So Facebook is a great way. If you train your teachers and your parents that if there's a problem, you can go to our Facebook page. We'll be putting up new content and information there. The messages will advance, so they have to be continually updated. And then we also have to identify what are going to be triggers for other action. Now, those triggers could relate to if it was an active shooter, their arrest or their arraignment or their bail hearing or the actual court trials, or if they're victims when the families go before the media. Those would trigger other communications events, and so they'll trigger media elements. A press release or a press conference, if you need to do that, and it is the rare occasion in a crisis that we would recommend that you hold such an event. You can communicate directly with your people without having to go through the media, and we strongly would encourage you to do that. We have a rule it's called why media, and you ask yourself 5 times before you engage directly with the media, why are you doing this? What do you hope to gain from it? How will you know in each of those elements? You need a move forward plan. You need to have regular project updates with your team so they know what's going on, and determine who's going on site. Now, I know you've got a school and you've got a campus and a location, but This could occur if there was a field trip that day. This could occur if they were at a sporting event or another location. Or it could occur here of going on site. If you'd had injured students and they were taken to the hospital, you'd want to send staff to the hospital there to help and then to work with the parents when they arrive to check about their children. So we talked about actions, and we've done a pretty good job, I think, of outlining those. Now let's shift it over to the communication side of the house. If you're explaining, you're losing. If you're talking about what occurred and why you really shouldn't be held accountable for this problem, you've already lost. So stop, and again, ask why you're communicating. What would you say that you needed to talk about? And we're going to think about that 5 times. Just like dealing with that young child, when you tell them don't do something, they ask why, and then you give an answer and they ask why again. You want to focus on why you want to communicate. If you're at loss on what to communicate, then I would tell you that you want to focus on the 3 base messages in a crisis, that you wouldn't be defined by the event, that you would invent the future, and you would embrace the families. The police or the fire want to talk about what occurred. Let them. Don't be on the stage with them. Let them carry that message forward. You want to talk about the future, not the past. Whatever occurred, that was the past. The future is that you're going to make your school the most prepared and the safest that's there. What actions you're going to put in place, but then you want to turn it back on the fact that every crisis is a human crisis, and embrace the families and talk about what you're doing in those areas. So if we're thinking about communications in a crisis, it's going to fall into one of 3 component areas. The first is coordination. You want to communicate internally to tell people what they need to be able to do. I put cyber breach here just to give you an idea to think outside of the box from the active shooter or the armed person associated with it. What do you need people to do? That could be as simple as a PA system, where you're telling people to follow one of the standard protocols, or it could be a notification message out to the parents telling them what's happening and what you need to have done. But it's a coordination kind of a communication. The second bucket of communications would be a crisis. This is more about the brand and reputation, and it's given generally later in the crisis. The coordination communications come very early. The crisis communications come very later. The last is the compliance. There are some times that we have to communicate. It's part of our responsibility, and in many cases it might be regulated. While I reference cyber here as an example of someone whose personal information or their personal health information was stolen, you've got an obligation to notify them. But you have other compliance notifications. If you're aware of a serious threat to a child or an attack on a child, then you have to notify the Department of Family Services and the police, and you have specific notifications requirements that vary state by state. So there's a compliance requirement here that you would have to meet and do. So if we're thinking about our crisis communications, again we go back to the predict, plan, perform. Predict what the concerns would be and who the audience is for those concerns. That's the first step if you're designing your message. The second step is then tailoring that message, the messenger, and the media or medium to fit that particular one and format it. What we would say to a parent would be different than what we would say to a child, and how this message would come. If we've had an event that's impacted a classroom and a group of students, I think those parents would be looking for a phone call from the school to tell them what's happening, not some kind of a text message or an email. It's clearly not having the media tell them. You want to be the one to deliver that message. And lastly, focus again on the 3 key messages at that point in this crisis that you're looking to get out. That becomes the standard by which you'll be measured. So let's summarize a little. If, and that's the whole reason we've got plans, we're concerned about the if this is going to happen. We have to have a warning system. We have to have a monitoring or an intelligence network that's going to tell us about it, and we need to know before the event happens, before now, and that's going to be the standard by which the parents and the students and the community will judge you. Did you notify them before now? How did they learn about it, and where did it come from? This is a focus on consequence management, and that's where the real measurement is going to be. The crisis itself may be very short, only a few minutes for it to occur, but the consequences will last for years, and that's how you'll be measured, and that new crisis manager that we're talking about. Now, some of the actions that we're talking about are tactical, and some are strategic. The tactical ones, the standard protocols, lockdown, lockout, shelter in place, and evacuate, that's to get those immediate areas. But several of them are also strategic in the nature of the impact that we're going to have. When we think about a crisis, and we think about this, many times we focus on the natural events or the violence events, but you need to start to now think of this as a business crisis. This is a business crisis risk that's impacting my school, because this will certainly impact our enrollment, our retention of students, our ability to attract the teachers that we will want to have to continue to build the excellent programs that we've had. So it's a shift in thinking from a crisis management into this consequence management, because this is a real exposure that we're dealing with. The intelligence network, we can certainly build an intelligence network in the crisis, but it's better if you know in advance so you have a baseline. So you can see this is the level of communications that we're having within the organization, and when it starts to escalate that you would need additional assistance within the decision process. So having an intelligence network, the monitoring of that will become very, very important to let you know the effectiveness of your execution. And now, instant tools. It used to be we had plans and binders sitting on shelf for software on computer systems. But today, you want to be able to put that plan in the palm of the hand of a teacher. We're no more than 3 feet away from a smartphone and a device. So the emergency plan could be right there in the phone, right in the teacher's hands. It could even, portions of it could be available directly to the students or to the parents so they would know. Now, others within the school might need more plans. They might need the crisis management plan or the impact assessment forms or the message maps. So we can segment it and get the right portion of the plan to the right person at the right time in a cost-effective way. So that makes it an instant access tool. You need it in a crisis. So if you want to think about it, we've got if something happens, and it is what you need, and you need all of that right now, before now. So as we're helping this crisis manager make these decisions, we want to simplify it for them. Have them think about the urgency and the importance of what they need to do. Those items that are not urgent, not important, they're not even going to be dealt with or addressed at all. If something is important but not urgent, we'll put that off and we'll deal with that at a little later date. And clearly, if it's urgent but not important, we're going to hold that back. It's that one quadrant that's urgent and important. Those are the items that the crisis manager must focus on, and that creates the sense of urgency to make a timely decision. A decision now is much better than a decision too late. So you've got to focus on getting a crisis manager and helping them be empowered to make those decisions immediately, because this is an important time. Now, it can be a complex process. This takes those same 5 stages and spells out a lot of the actions that your crisis manager will be having to deal with at each step along the way. And you see the questions along the bottom of the screen is focusing on it. But it gets us to that consequence management, the crisis PR, the return to the new normal, the critical decision support, because everybody's going to want to know what is it they're supposed to do and what is it they're supposed to say. That's the environment that we fill in. One last comment. This creating the intelligence network empowers your crisis manager and your crisis management team to know before now, to see this is what the media is talking about, to see what's being said by the students. And in many cases, we can either prevent or mitigate a crisis because we have that understanding early into the process. And we solve it using the predict, plan, perform methodology. Now, after the crisis has occurred and you're in that post period, you're going to do a hot wash. What worked well? What didn't work well? What did you want to know that you didn't know? How can we update our plans associated with it? Now, in this maturity model, look at the decision process, the roles and responsibilities, the information clarity, the speed of decision making, and the communications effectiveness. Those are the 5 key dimensions that we look at from a crisis management perspective. And we measure them across 4 different stages, moving from a stage 1 liability and surprise all the way up to where it's strategic and a part of the culture of who our school is. And we've worked with many of the schools that are on the call today, and we understand your culture. We understand your mission and where your focus is. But your crisis management needs to rise to that same level. And unfortunately, most schools that we see today are in that stage 1 or barely into stage 2 element of involvement. And it's important that your senior leadership becomes involved. Because when we find this, it's when minutes matter, seconds count. It's the ability here to make the critical decisions, to get the right message to the right people. Should they evacuate? Should they shelter in place? Should we take this next step? What's occurred, and what is it that we want to expect? In a crisis, speed is quality, and that's a tough environment for a new crisis manager to come in and to see what to do. You don't want the first crisis they see be the one in your school. So doing the exercises, doing the training will make a significant difference. So as we think about it, the methodology that makes sense is predict, plan, perform. At each step of the crisis, you have to stop and predict what's going to happen next. What's the vulnerability? What's the threat? What's the impact that we're about to see? Putting the plan in place, the policies, the procedures. Maybe that's your behavioral risk threat assessment program that helps your school understand how to identify those behaviors and respond. Maybe it's your anonymous reporting plan. It could be any of the particular areas that we're focused on, not the least of which is your crisis management and your crisis communications plan with the predetermined message maps. And then finally the performing, the testing of this, the supplies, and the monitoring throughout the crisis. Those are going to be the items that make the difference and will help decide, is this new crisis manager going to succeed or fail at the time you absolutely need them? So what can you do now? What are the next steps? Do you want to know what will happen tomorrow? The answer is yes. I think we all want to know that, and we really can't afford not to. And in today's world, in a cost-effective way, you can actually be in that position. And the way you can start to know is have the plans, have it tested, have it drilled, build the intelligence network, go through that so that everybody is on the same page. Now, in August, we ran a virtual exercise. I don't know if your school was one of the ones that participated. We took an event with a lightning strike and some students down and had it move into a tornado and the impacts on the school. And all the schools that participated identified opportunities that they could enhance their planning. We're going to do another virtual exercise this time in December, and we picked 2 dates, December the 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time or December the 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, this virtual exercise is going to be different. It's going to be a cyber breach exercise. All of our schools have information related to personal identifiable information, personal health information, all of those elements along with other factors associated with the students and faculty and staff that you have. So this will be a chance for you to sit down with your crisis team to see what do we know, what are we going to do, what are we going to say, and go through that cycle. We're going to be doing this exercise this time both combining businesses and schools, so we'll have a mixed audience, but it's a 90-minute event to give you that opportunity. We had an overwhelming response from the hundreds that participated in the exercises in August, and they asked first for more notice when the next event was going to occur so they could get their teams together. So this is your early notice that in 2 months we're going to be doing this particular event for you to experience and to go through it. And it's been geared toward an area that many have indicated they're less certain on the actions that they need to take place. The next thing you can do is to make sure your plans align to standards and best practices. If you wrote your plan, that's great, but you want to make sure that you didn't miss something, that everything is there and been in place. Design that intelligence network and make sure you're aware of what's going on. Get the instant access tool so that it's on a smart phone or device within that, and schedule some crisis coach training. This webinar is an example of that. But those are all things that you need to be doing. We certainly would be glad to help you with that. By the way, there is no charge for the virtual exercise that's coming up on December 8th and 9th. If you'd like a brief from today's webinar, you can go to firestorm.com and download the brief here, and it will be something you can share internally, or you can go there and view other webinars that we've conducted. So just go to our website, look for the briefs, and you'll find that easy access. Our thanks to RenWeb for underwriting this webinar series and sharing this information with you. We look forward to continuing to expand the information that you have to assist at those critical times like a crisis. If you've got questions about today's webinar, you can send us a note at webinars@firestorm.com. You can pick up the phone and call us at 800-321-2219, or go to our website at firestorm.com, fill out a contact form, and we'll be back in touch. We had a large number of schools on today's call, so we're going to make an attempt to reach out to everyone that was here today to see if you have questions that we can help with. Thanks for all that you do in your school and to help create a wonderful environment to have our young people grow, and in spite of the challenges and risks and crises that we face today. I think it's a unique time for us. Unfortunately, the events that we saw in Oregon and the 2 other schools that had events that were discovered and were able to be stopped, that's an exciting thing. You need to be thinking along those lines also. If you've got questions, we're here to answer them. Have a great day, and again, thank you for all that you do. Goodbye.